The spaceport was enormous, a glittering city of metal and light that stretched for kilometers. Ships of every shape and size hummed and blinked as they prepared to launch, dock, or refuel. Travelers bustled through the terminals, dragging luggage or rushing to catch last-minute flights. But in the central hall, something strange was happening. Alarms shrieked suddenly, red lights blinking across walls and ceilings. People froze in confusion and fear. Conversations died in mid-word. Some looked around wildly, unsure what was happening. Others simply dropped to the floor or held their children tight. The chaos spread fast. At the center of the disturbance was a dragon infant, no bigger than a human toddler but shining faintly with silvery scales that flickered under the red lights. Its wings, delicate and trembling, shivered against its tiny back. The baby's eyes, large and glowing softly, were full of tears. Its mouth opened in a wail, a sound that seemed to shake the very air, rattling nearby equipment. Every cry made panels flicker, lights blink, and a low hum vibrate through the walls. Engines sputtered as if afraid to start. The spaceport, usually alive with order and precision, now teetered on the edge of panic. The Dragon Empress stood nearby, her wings folded behind her in a posture of restrained authority. She was tall, regal, her scales a deep shade of gold that shimmered even in the emergency lights. Normally, her presence alone could silence a room. Guards and attendants would move quickly at her signal, and the entire station would bend to her will. But now even she looked helpless. Her sharp eyes darted from the baby to the trembling systems around them. Her jaw tightened. Her hands clenched, then released. Every instinct told her to act, but no one had ever prepared her for this. No one had ever told her what to do when her own child's cries could endanger an entire spaceport. Around her, guards hesitated. They were elite, trained in combat and emergency procedures, but nothing in their training covered the strange resonance of a dragon infant's cry. Some hovered with weapons at the ready, unsure whether they were supposed to defend the Empress, evacuate the crowd, or somehow quiet the child. Others just stared, frozen by awe and fear. The larger dragons in the hall let out low growls, but even they dared not approach. The baby's cries seemed to stir a strange, unpredictable energy in the air, and no one wanted to risk angering it further. Travelers and workers began to scatter. Some ran toward exits, their faces pale, their voices trembling as they called to companions. Others crouched behind counters or benches, peeking over cautiously. Children cried, frightened by the alarms and the glowing, trembling creature in the center. Robots, normally precise and calm, stopped mid-task. Conveyor belts shuddered and halted. Lights flickered and the main display showed warning signs. System instability detected. Energy flux overload. Even the holographic schedules for ships' arrivals and departures shimmered and went blank intermittently. Panic was spreading faster than anyone could react. The Empress's attendants rushed to her side, bowing and offering advice. "We should move the child to a safe chamber," one said, his voice urgent. "The energy fluctuations could overload the station core." Another spoke quickly, "We could contain it with a force field, at least temporarily." The Empress shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "It is not angry. It is afraid. If we force it, it will only make things worse. We must calm it first." Her voice was strong, but even she could feel the tension in the air, the danger lurking in the soft tremor of the baby's wings. Her mind raced for a solution, but there was none. No manual, no protocol, no magic could teach her how to soothe a dragon infant in the middle of a crowded spaceport. Meanwhile, the baby's cries grew louder, more desperate. Sparks flickered along control panels. A small docking ship nearby shivered as if caught in a storm. A gust of hot air swept through the hall from the ventilation systems, causing a few travelers to stumble. Even the high ceilings seemed to hum with the energy the baby released. The infant's large eyes scanned the crowd, its tiny claws grasping at the air, reaching for something, or someone, it could understand. The Empress noticed this, a flicker of hope in her otherwise worried gaze. Perhaps the child could be calmed if only the right person approached. But who would dare? In the crowd, a few humans peeked out from behind crates or maintenance panels. They whispered in fear, hesitant to get too close. Most assumed this was beyond their understanding. A dragon's child was not a human problem. Yet, in the middle of the panic, one human stood apart. Riven, a mechanic with grease-stained overalls and tools dangling from his belt, observed quietly. He was not powerful, not trained for diplomacy or combat. He had no weapons, no title, and no authority. But he had something most others lacked: a calm mind in the middle of chaos and a heart that refused to turn away from suffering. Riven noticed small details others ignored. The baby's eyes were darting toward the flashing lights and loudspeakers, not at the guards or the Empress. Its wings trembled more when people moved quickly around it. Its cries were not anger or malice, they were fear and confusion. Slowly, carefully, Riven began to plan. He would need to approach without sudden movements, avoid making loud noises, and somehow reach the child's attention without triggering more energy surges. If anyone else tried this, they could be hurt, or worse. But Riven felt certain he could do it. There was no time to wait for orders, no moment to seek permission. The spaceport itself seemed to hang in balance, teetering on the edge of disaster, and the infant's wails echoed like a warning. The Empress watched him carefully. At first she thought he would fail. He was human, small and fragile. His movements were slow and measured, but they were precise, deliberate. He knelt near a panel, adjusting a display with gentle taps, humming under his breath in a low, steady rhythm. The baby's cries softened, just slightly, as if it sensed that someone in the crowd was not afraid. Other humans and dragons alike paused, staring at the mechanic who dared to step forward while the entire station seemed to panic around him. A small spark of hope flickered in the Empress's mind. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance to calm her child without harm. Perhaps, just perhaps, a human could make a difference where the strongest dragons could not. The alarms continued to echo, the lights still flickered, and the energy system shivered like a frightened bird. But in the center of the hall, the baby's cries wavered, growing slightly softer. Eyes shifted toward the human in the overalls. The Empress's hand hovered near her child, ready to intervene. Guards relaxed slightly, though still tense. Travelers and workers watched, holding their breath. No one could predict what would happen next. But in that moment, a fragile calm began to spread, born not of power, authority, or force, but of simple courage and quiet understanding. Riven Holt wiped sweat from his brow and leaned on a nearby console, his hands still greasy from hours of work. Sparks had flown earlier when he repaired a malfunctioning engine panel, and his overalls were streaked with black streaks and silver dust. Normally, he would have preferred to stay hidden in the maintenance corridors, working quietly with tools and machinery. Humans like him were not supposed to be involved in dragon affairs, especially not in a spaceport filled with high-ranking officials and royal guards. Yet here he was, staring at the center of chaos, his mind focused entirely on a tiny, trembling dragon infant. Around him, panic grew. The Empress's attendants argued loudly, their voices sharp and frustrated. "Move it to a safe chamber. It's too dangerous here," one shouted. "Contain the child. Contain it before it damages more systems," another said. Guards shuffled nervously, unsure whether to act on orders or wait for a miracle. Travelers pressed against walls, holding their children, whispering frantic prayers to gods they had never truly believed in. Machines beeped, whirred, and groaned under the energy surges caused by the baby's cries. It was a dangerous, tense moment, and yet Riven noticed something almost no one else did. The baby was not angry. Not in the way dragons could be angry. Its wings flapped weakly, trembling as if it were cold or scared. Its eyes were wide, blinking rapidly at the flashing lights. It was overwhelmed, confused by the sudden noise and movement in the spaceport. People screamed, lights blinked, and systems groaned. The infant's senses were flooded. Riven realized quietly that it was not a threat, it was simply frightened. He glanced at the Empress. Her golden scales glowed faintly under the red warning lights, and her posture was rigid with worry. Even she, with all her power, seemed unsure how to help. That knowledge only strengthened Riven's resolve. He had no magic, no authority, no weapons, but he had calm, focus, and a strange understanding of how little creatures could be soothed when they were scared. Humans knew these things. Riven remembered his own daughter when she had been small, crying in the middle of a noisy, bustling human city. Rhythm, soft words, warmth, these had always worked. Maybe the same principles could apply here. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. Every movement was careful, slow, deliberate. He avoided loud noises, sudden gestures, or anything that could startle the baby further. He kept his hands visible, empty, to show he meant no harm. A few travelers gasped, stepping back, but Riven did not falter. His eyes stayed on the infant, scanning for the smallest signs of distress or comfort. The baby's cry wavered slightly as he approached, as if it noticed his calm. The energy in the room, once tense and chaotic, seemed to respond. Machines sputtered less, lights flickered more slowly, and the tremor in the air softened. The Empress watched closely, leaning slightly forward. She could see the difference immediately. The human's approach was not forceful, not commanding, not desperate. it was careful and gentle. For the first time since the alarms began, the baby's gaze shifted. It looked directly at him. Its glowing eyes studied his face, large and unfamiliar yet calm. Riven crouched down slowly, lowering himself to be closer to the child's level. He hummed softly under his breath, a low rhythmic sound. It was almost a song, a human song of comfort, instinctive and unplanned. He tapped a finger gently on the metal floor, keeping time with the hum. The baby's wings twitched, its cries slowing just a fraction. Riven whispered quietly, though he did not expect the infant to understand his words. "It's okay. You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." His tone was steady, warm, confident. He kept his breathing even. Panic would spread if he faltered. Around him, the guards remained tense but did not move. They watched, unsure, as a human, small and fragile, dared to approach a dragon infant that had thrown the entire spaceport into chaos. Whispers spread through the crowd. "He thinks he can calm it," one muttered. "Is he crazy?" asked another. But Riven ignored them. He could not afford distraction. His entire focus was on the baby, reading the subtle signals of wings, claws, and eyes. The infant's cries softened further. It tilted its head, curious now, less fearful. Its small claws reached out toward Riven, not in anger but in exploration. Riven held his hand steady, giving the baby a safe place to focus on. He did not grab or force anything. He simply allowed the infant to see that his hand was not dangerous. The Empress's golden eyes widened in surprise. The baby was responding. It was no longer only afraid, it was curious. Riven's mind raced with careful thoughts. He needed to stabilize the environment slowly. The flickering lights, the blaring alarms, and the humming machines were still loud, but he had noticed weak points in the system. With gentle movements, he adjusted a nearby panel, rerouting minor energy flows to reduce surges. Sparks of light dimmed. Panels stopped flashing erratically. He hummed louder now, keeping the rhythm consistent. It worked. The baby's cry changed pitch slightly, a small note of relief threading through it. Step by step, inch by inch, he drew closer, never forcing interaction. He let the child set the pace, letting it approach him when it wanted. Guards held their position, no longer stepping forward. The Empress tilted her head slightly, noticing a faint, almost magical calm spreading outward from the human mechanic. She did not understand how it worked, but she felt it. The baby was responding, slowly and steadily, to this small, determined creature. Finally, Riven was close enough that he could see every tiny movement. The baby's wings fluttered, then rested. Its eyes watched him intently. The Empress's attendants whispered among themselves, amazed. Something extraordinary was happening. A human with nothing but courage, calm, and instinct, was approaching a dragon infant and winning its trust. The spaceport, still trembling slightly from the early chaos, seemed to pause, holding its breath, watching this quiet miracle unfold. Riven extended a single finger slowly to the child. The infant's small claws twitched, then reached forward carefully. The human did not flinch, did not pull back. He held his hand steady, offering comfort without force. Around them, the chaos of alarms, blinking lights, and shouting voices seemed less urgent. Travelers peered from behind cover, guards exchanged nervous glances, and even the Empress allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod. A human was doing what no dragon, no magic, and no protocol could. He was soothing a frightened child. In that moment, the spaceport was no longer just a place of machines, orders, and chaos. It became something fragile, delicate, and hopeful. A human and a dragon infant, two very different species, connected through courage, calm, and understanding. The world watched silently, waiting to see what would happen next. Riven Holt lowered himself to one knee, careful not to move too quickly. His hands were still greasy from his earlier repairs, but he made no effort to clean them. There was no time, and besides, the baby seemed unconcerned by dirt or mess. What mattered was calm. He could feel the low hum of the spaceport's energy fluctuating around him, a tension that pressed in like a heavy weight. The baby's cries had not stopped completely, but they were weaker now, uneven, trembling notes instead of the sharp, urgent wails from before. He focused on a nearby cooling panel, one of the smaller ones that had sparked earlier. It was responsible for distributing energy across several sections of the terminal. When it malfunctioned, it caused minor energy spikes that the baby seemed to sense instantly. Riven adjusted the panel carefully, turning knobs and reconnecting small wires. Sparks popped, but nothing dramatic. With each adjustment, the humming of the station softened. Lights stopped flickering so sharply, consoles stabilized, and the low vibration that made everyone uneasy lessened. The baby's cries became quieter, as if it could feel the calm spreading through the air. As he worked, Riven began humming softly, a low, steady sound that carried through the immediate space around him. It was not loud enough to reach the entire terminal, but it was enough for the dragon infant to hear clearly. The rhythm was slow, gentle, comforting, a kind of music designed to calm small creatures. The infant's wings twitched less frequently, and its claws relaxed slightly. Riven kept his eyes on the child, never taking his attention away. He knew that one wrong move, one sudden sound, could send the baby back into panic. After a moment he began speaking in soft, deliberate words. Not to the Empress, not to the guards, not to the humans crouched behind crates, holding their breath. He spoke only to the baby. "I am fixing this," he said quietly. "I'm making it safe. You do not need to be afraid. I will not hurt you." His tone was calm, almost melodic, his words chosen carefully to reassure. He repeated them slowly, softly, letting the rhythm of his voice match the hum he had been making. The baby's large eyes, still wet with tears, followed every movement. It tilted its head as Riven adjusted a wire, humming another low note, then tapping a panel with a gentle rhythm. The dragon infant's curiosity began to outweigh its fear. Its wings twitched once, then rested. Its glowing eyes reflected the soft light of the terminal rather than the red alarms that had dominated the space before. The infant's tiny claws, which had been gripping the floor, relaxed further. It seemed to sense that this human meant no harm and that the chaotic energy of the spaceport was becoming less threatening. Around them, the terminal grew quieter. Travelers still whispered among themselves and some guards exchanged uncertain glances, but the immediate area near Riven and the baby felt calmer, almost peaceful. The air seemed less charged. The lights flickered less, and the low hum that had vibrated through the walls became almost steady. Even machines seemed to respond to the shift in energy, stabilizing slightly as if they too could sense the calming effect the human mechanic had initiated. The Empress watched carefully. Her golden scales shimmered in the dimming emergency lights, and her eyes were sharp and curious. She had always known humans to be small, fragile, and mostly cautious. They were clever, yes, but she had never considered that one might have the courage or insight to calm a dragon infant in the middle of a crowded, chaotic spaceport. Her heart, hidden behind centuries of power and authority, felt a flicker of something she had not expected: hope. This human was not reacting with fear, nor was he trying to control her child with force. He was seeing the dragon infant for what it truly was: a baby. A fragile, frightened being in need of care. Riven continued his careful work, speaking softly as he went. "I'm almost done here. You're safe now. You can rest." He adjusted another wire, tapped another small panel, and the last flicker of light stabilized. The baby blinked slowly, its large eyes taking in every detail of this strange human kneeling before it. Its wings twitched once, a sign of curiosity, and it tilted its head, watching Riven with intense focus. The hum, the tapping, and the soft words had created a rhythm the infant could understand. Slowly it began to relax further, and for the first time since the chaos began, it seemed to believe that it was safe. A small group of guards dared to move slightly closer, still tense, still uncertain. They had been trained for emergencies, for combat, for every imaginable crisis, but nothing in their training had prepared them for this. They watched as the human mechanic continued to kneel, adjust panels, hum, and speak softly. The baby had stopped flapping its wings wildly and was now looking at him, not with fear but with cautious interest. The Empress allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod. She realized that this human was extraordinary in a way few dragons or humans could understand. Riven's voice carried no authority, no demand, no judgment, only calm and reassurance. "You're safe. No one is going to hurt you. I will make sure everything is fine." He repeated the words slowly, letting the tone and rhythm become familiar to the infant. The baby's cries softened further, now only quiet whimpers. Its small claws rested lightly on the floor, and its glowing eyes were fixed on the human before it. The Empress's attendants whispered to one another, astonished. The infant's energy fluctuations, which had threatened the station, were almost completely under control now. The spaceport, for the first time since the alarms began, seemed to hold its breath. The whirring machines, flickering lights, and shouts of panicked travelers faded into the background. All focus was on the small, kneeling human and the dragon infant before him. It was a quiet miracle, a creature from one species connecting with the child of another through patience, calm, and simple understanding. The Empress's mind raced. She had witnessed wars, rebellions, and negotiations across galaxies. She had seen humans demonstrate bravery in battle, cunning in diplomacy, and skill in countless other ways. But she had never seen one so young in experience, yet so wise in understanding, that they could calm her child without force or authority. Finally, the dragon infant stretched one tiny claw toward Riven, as if testing the space between them. He did not flinch. He held his hand steady, letting the baby come to him. Slowly, the infant's wings relaxed entirely, and a small cooing sound replaced the previous cries. Riven smiled faintly, his work complete for the moment. Around him, the terminal remained tense, but the danger had passed. The Empress felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She understood fully now that this human had seen her child not as a source of chaos or power, not as a weapon or threat, but simply as a baby in need of care. In that quiet, soft-lit corner of the massive spaceport, two very different beings had found trust. One small human, kneeling in grease-stained overalls, and one dragon infant, trembling and glowing, connected through simple words, soft sounds, and steady, gentle movements. And in that connection, the spaceport itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Riven Holt's hands worked steadily, adjusting the final wires on the cooling panel. Sparks popped briefly, but there were no sudden flares, no alarms. Slowly, carefully, the systems of the spaceport began to stabilize. Lights that had been flickering wildly now glowed steadily. Panels that had been erratic returned to normal operation. Even the low hum that had filled the terminal, making travelers uneasy, became smooth and steady. Riven straightened slightly, wiping his hands on his overalls. He glanced at the dragon infant, who was still watching him closely, wings tucked and eyes curious. The infant blinked slowly, tilting its small head as it studied the human kneeling before it. For the first time it moved deliberately. One tiny claw reached toward Riven, then another, testing the distance. It crawled slowly, its movements careful, deliberate, and curious. It no longer flinched or trembled. Its glowing eyes followed every step, every movement of his hands. The wailing had stopped, replaced by quiet, tentative coos. The soft hum of the spaceport and the rhythm of Riven's voice had reassured the child. Now it seemed to want more than just calm, it wanted trust and perhaps friendship. The Empress watched from a short distance, her golden scales shining faintly under the emergency lights. Her wings were folded behind her, but she shifted nervously. She had spent centuries commanding attention and respect, yet she had never witnessed a moment like this. Her child, a dragon infant of immense potential and importance, crawled willingly toward a human, a being considered small and fragile by dragon standards. She expected hesitation, fear, maybe even a snap of claws or a burst of energy to send the human fleeing. But the infant moved calmly, curiosity shining in its glowing eyes. The Empress felt a mixture of awe and cautious hope. Riven looked at the baby, then slowly removed his gloves. His hands were large compared to the infant's tiny claws, but steady and gentle. He extended one finger, giving the dragon child a simple, safe point of contact. The baby paused for a moment as if deciding whether to trust him, then carefully wrapped one claw around his finger. Riven did not pull back. He let the child hold his hand fully, allowing it to feel secure. The infant's wings twitched once, then rested completely. Its glowing eyes softened and a small, contented coo left its mouth. The cries had stopped entirely. A hush spread through the terminal. Travelers and workers who had been hiding behind counters and crates now peeked forward. Guards lowered their weapons slightly, still tense but unable to believe their eyes. Attendants whispered to each other, astonished. The infant's grip on the human finger was gentle, yet firm enough to show trust. Riven smiled faintly, keeping his hand steady. He whispered softly, "It's okay. You're safe." The baby blinked slowly, then cooed again, seeming to answer him in its own small, glowing way. The Empress stepped forward carefully, every eye following her. Her golden scales caught the light as she moved, her expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, she lowered herself slightly toward the human. "Riven Holt," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet terminal. "You have done what no dragon, no guard, and no attendant could. You have calmed my child." She paused, letting her words sink in. The spaceport seemed to exhale, the tension softening further as the Empress spoke. Riven shook his head, still kneeling, his hands steady. "I didn't do anything special, Your Majesty," he said simply. "I just tried to make it feel safe." His voice was modest, almost hesitant. He did not seek recognition or reward. He simply focused on the baby still holding his finger, cooing quietly, glowing faintly in response to the calm around them. The Empress studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. It was a small gesture but powerful. She understood that this human had shown courage, calm, and understanding in a way that transcended titles, authority, or wealth. "Your actions today will be remembered," she said, turning to the nearby guards and attendants. "This human has proven that care and patience can achieve what force and fear cannot." The words rippled through the crowd, and murmurs of astonishment spread. Travelers who had feared for their lives now whispered in awe, telling each other what they were witnessing. A human, small and fragile, holding the trust of a dragon infant in his hand. Riven stayed kneeling, letting the baby explore. The child nudged his palm with its tiny snout, then climbed a little higher onto his forearm. It was playful, curious, and calm, no longer trembling with fear. Other humans nearby watched quietly, some daring to step closer, but none interfering. Even guards, trained for combat and control, observed respectfully. A small miracle had occurred, one that no one could have predicted. Trust and care had bridged the gap between species in an instant. News began to spread across the spaceport quickly, carried by both human and dragon attendants. Word was not about dominance, power, or technology. It was about care. It was about a small human showing courage and patience when everyone else had frozen in fear. Travelers whispered the story to each other. Maintenance crews paused their work to watch. Even the automated announcements were silenced, letting the moment remain uninterrupted. The Empress, powerful and revered, had publicly acknowledged a human mechanic, breaking a tradition of centuries. Riven finally stood slowly, careful not to startle the infant. The baby held onto his hand, its tiny claws gripping him lightly. He smiled, still humble, and spoke gently. "You are safe now," he said. "Nothing will hurt you here." The infant cooed in response, its wings fluttering lightly as if in agreement. The terminal remained calm, the energy stable, and the humans and dragons watching understood that something extraordinary had taken place. The Empress knelt slightly, reaching toward her child, who responded by letting go of Riven's hand just long enough to nuzzle against her. Then, satisfied, the baby returned to Riven's hand briefly, showing that it trusted both its mother and this small human. It was a connection that went beyond words, beyond species, and even beyond centuries of history. Witnesses understood immediately. Care, patience, and courage had achieved what no power could. Finally the Empress straightened. "Riven Holt," she said again, voice strong, clear, and proud. "You have reminded us all that trust can be built through kindness, and courage is not always measured in size or strength. Thank you." Her words echoed through the spaceport, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. Humans and dragons alike understood that this was not a story of fear or dominance. It was a story of compassion, patience, and understanding. And in that quiet terminal, the dragon infant cooed softly, holding the hand of the human who had shown it safety, while the Empress smiled, knowing that a bridge had been built between two very different worlds. Time passed slowly after the day of the incident in the spaceport. The chaos had ended, systems stabilized, and travelers had continued on their journeys, speaking in hushed tones about the small human who had calmed the Dragon Empress's child. Riven Holt returned to his usual work in the maintenance bays, his overalls again streaked with grease and dust, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. To the casual observer he was just another mechanic, bending over a panel or tightening a bolt. Yet the story of that day had already begun to spread across the galaxy, whispered from station to station, from ship to ship. Historians would later mark that day as a turning point, not in the usual ways people expected. There were no treaties signed in grand halls, no weapons discharged, no battles fought in the vacuum of space. Instead, it had happened quietly in the center of a bustling spaceport. A human, small and fragile, had chosen to act with courage and kindness when fear had frozen everyone else. That choice had changed how dragons and humans saw each other forever. On the spaceport itself, attendants and guards began to tell the story over and over. "Do you remember how the baby was crying?" one would ask. "And he just knelt there, speaking softly?" another would respond. Crew members would nod, repeating how calm and steady the human had been, how he had risked nothing but his dignity to help a frightened child. Even other species visiting the station would hear the tale, their eyes widening in disbelief at the thought of such bravery and compassion. Riven never sought recognition. He worked quietly, repairing panels, adjusting conduits, checking engines. To him, it had been instinct, something any human with patience and courage could have done. Yet the galaxy had noticed. Dragon stations began quietly hiring human engineers and caretakers, not because they needed weapons or labor, but because they had seen the value of a species that approached problems with care, intelligence, and bravery in unexpected ways. Humans were small and fragile, yes, but fearless when it came to helping others. That realization spread slowly but steadily, reshaping the way humans were treated across multiple star systems. The Dragon Empress watched her child grow, always remembering that day in the spaceport. The infant had been nervous and overwhelmed, trembling with fear, yet a single human had reached across the gap of species and calmed it completely. The Empress ensured that her child understood the lesson well. Humans were not creatures to be judged solely by size, strength, or technology. They were fragile, yes, but they had courage that could match dragons in ways that power alone could not. The child, now growing, often observed Riven quietly when he visited the station. There was a curiosity, a sense of admiration, and sometimes even a small, playful nuzzle of recognition when he approached. Across the galaxy, stories of Riven's courage became part of the culture of interspecies cooperation. Other human engineers and caretakers who worked on dragon stations found themselves treated with new respect. The old hierarchy, where dragons had always been distant and humans considered minor, began to shift. It was not a revolution of war, nor a decree handed down from emperors. It was subtle, quiet, but incredibly powerful. A culture built on trust, understanding, and the knowledge that even the smallest beings could make the biggest difference. Riven, for his part, remained unchanged. He did not ask for medals, promotions, or accolades. He continued to repair panels, inspect engines, and guide apprentices. Yet when he walked through the terminals now, he noticed that the way people looked at humans had changed. Guards nodded in respect. Travelers whispered the story as if it were a legend. And the dragon infant, now a little older and stronger, often sought him out with a small chirp or a playful gesture, remembering the calm that had first reached it in the spaceport. The Dragon Empress, observing these subtle changes, realized that the choice of one human had reshaped the future. Diplomacy and power had their place, but kindness, simple, fearless kindness, could bridge gaps that no treaty ever could. She made certain that her child grew up with that understanding at the center of its life. Humans might be small, fragile, and easily harmed, yet their hearts could be vast and their courage immense. That truth became a cornerstone of how dragons viewed humans from that day onward. In the following years, human caretakers and engineers were given positions of trust on dragon stations across the galaxy. They repaired engines, tended to young dragons, and helped maintain the delicate balance of energy and life on each station. Every time a new dragon hatchling cried, humans were often the first to approach, not with force but with calm, patience, and understanding. And every time, the results mirrored that day with Riven. Less fear, more trust, and sometimes quiet laughter from both species. Riven himself became a quiet legend. He never sought to claim that title, but dragon historians and human record keepers alike noted the day he knelt in the center of a panicked spaceport, speaking softly, fixing a cooling panel, and earning the trust of a dragon infant. In countless records, stories, and accounts, that moment was remembered as the start of a new era. An era where humans were no longer seen as minor or fragile beings to be overlooked. They were recognized as caretakers, problem solvers, and, above all, courageous hearts capable of changing the galaxy through kindness. And so, as years turned into decades, the Dragon Empress's child grew up surrounded by humans who had proven themselves through quiet courage. The baby, now a young dragon, often looked back on the day when fear had gripped the spaceport and a single human had calmed its heart. The lesson had never been forgotten. Humans were small and fragile, yes, but fearless when it came to compassion. That lesson shaped not only the young dragon but the culture of the galaxy itself, slowly building a world where care, empathy, and courage were as powerful as the strongest wings or the sharpest claws. Riven continued his work, humble and steady, while the galaxy quietly shifted around him. The spaceport remained bustling, lights blinking, engines humming, but beneath it all, the memory of that quiet, brave human who knelt in the center of chaos remained alive. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest, most ordinary actions could ripple across the stars, changing hearts, lives, and even the future of civilizations. And in that truth the galaxy found hope.